Hey guys, what's up? This is Chris from StormLifestyle, back again for the next installment of the Effective Nutrition for Body Recomposition series. In the previous video and article I discussed the goal setting and which goal you should choose. My basic recommendations were, if you're fat, cut down to a lean frame. If you're very skinny, go on a bulk. Try to stay within healthy body fat levels for most of your training career and most of your life. So in this part we're going to discuss setting calories for your goal. As usual, the article is linked in the description below and I'll discuss the most interesting things in this video. First of all, I would like to say that I find it much more efficient to look at calorie intake on a week-to-week basis instead of a day-to-day basis. Next, I want to say that I usually prefer the calorie cycling approaches. What is calorie cycling? Basically, it's a fluctuating caloric intake on a day-to-day level. What it boils down to is that at the end of the week you have to be in a net surplus for a bulking phase or a net deficit for a fat loss phase. Here's a random graph I made. This person is training 5 days per week, has 5 higher calorie intake days, 2 rest days where his calorie intake is lower. What matters is the weekly average. That will determine whether he will gain or lose weight. So calorie cycling is not wizardry. It needs to have common sense behind it for it to work. What is the reason that I prefer calorie cycling? There's a few. The main one is that linear diets or linear caloric intake can seem like a constant drag. It might be something individual, but I prefer the cyclical approach because it's a little bit more interesting, provides variety. Next, physiologically it makes more sense to eat more on training days after your training. If you do strength training, you'll be supporting muscle growth, you'll be supporting recovery. Time to move on to actually setting calories. To provide a solid starting frame, we need to have an idea of your base caloric intake. This can be referred to as your maintenance calories. It's kind of hard to determine maintenance calories because the body is a dynamic beast. It's not static. So it is kind of hard to estimate and say this is my exact maintenance because it's going to be a fluctuating number. However, if we do not make any effort whatsoever to guesstimate a maintenance, it's kind of hard to provide a solid starting calorie intake. Because of this, we will make an effort to guesstimate our maintenance calories. Step 1 that I recommend is calculating your BMR, your base metabolic rate. This is very simply put the amount of calories you need as a human to simply function and be alive. There are a few scientific formulas out there for determining BMR. I personally prefer the Katz-McGirdle formula because it's suitable for an athletic population and it takes body fat percentage into account. If you do not know what your body fat percentage is, honestly, I would just recommend making an honest guesstimate of it, using a picture for a reference. If you can, try to get it accurately measured, but all the measuring tools out there usually kind of suck and aren't that accurate. Realize that you will be adjusting your caloric intake as you go anyway, so it doesn't really matter if you're 1 or 2 or 3% off. Step 2 is adding physical activity level to your BMR. These are the values that I use, and one thing that's important to keep in mind that this is your physical activity level outside of your conscious sport or training activities. We will add that energy expenditure on top of this later. An example, a personal trainer I would consider usually as an active or highly active person. Someone who has a desk job is usually a sedentary type person, but if that person makes a lot of conscious effort to walk around, a lot of stair walking and commutes by bike, you could consider that as a low active, perhaps an active individual. In my opinion, it's usually better to underestimate activity level than it is to overestimate it, because if you overestimate it, then you will often end up overestimating your caloric requirements. Step 3 is adding energy expenditure from your training on top of the BMR and PAL value. There are a few formulas that you can use to add your energy expenditure from training. In the article I highlight 2 activity multipliers for strength training. For other activities such as tricking or whatever other sports that you do, you can also make a guesstimate of that and add that on top of the BMR plus physical activity level. Step 4 will be adding TEF, so thermic effect of food, on top of BMR plus PAL plus your energy expenditure from training. TEF is a value that can value from 10% to 25%, and it's really based on things like the amount of food you consume, how good your diet is. The leaner you are, the higher the TEF you can choose. If you are unsure what to do, I would suggest picking a TEF value from 10 to 15%. After adding those 4 together, you basically have your maintenance for a training day. So remember, you added the training in there, so it's a training day maintenance estimate. If you want your rest day maintenance estimate, remove the training, just add TF on top of BMR plus PAL. Step 5 is going to be adding the amount of rest days and training days together to get your weekly total. Simply calculate the amount of training days you have, add the rest days on top, make sure you get a 7-day total because a week consists of 7 days, obviously. Then you have basically determined your weekly estimated maintenance. Step 6 is adding the deficit for fat loss or surplus for gaining on top of this weekly estimated maintenance. First of all, let me start with bulking, so mass gain. The recommended surpluses will basically depend on your training category. The more training experience you have, the smaller the surplus recommended. You can't put on as much muscle mass as a newbie anymore, so you have to be a little bit more cautious about your calorie surplus. The more novice you are, the higher your gaining surplus can be. Just keep in mind that you don't YOLO bulk, don't do a dirty bulk, don't use an excessive surplus. That will just cause fat gain to accumulate much faster, and that's fat you will have to diet off at some point again if you want to stay within healthy body fat levels. Next scenario is cutting. The recommended deficit for cutting will also depend on your training category or your body fat level. The higher your body fat is, the harder you can push your calorie deficit. The leaner you are and the more training experience you have, the more cautious you should be about your calorie deficit. So a small recap thus far. You have your estimated maintenance for the week, then you put your deficit or surplus on top of that. That will be a solid starting frame for your weekly calorie intake. Later on I will discuss how to distribute these calories over the week, and like I mentioned before, I'm a fan of eating more on training days in the post-training period and keeping caloric intake a little bit lower on the days where you're not physically active or you're not training. Something that you should keep in mind during a cut, there are a few things happening in your body which cause you to have to lower your calories. Like for instance, your body weight will go down, and as a consequence of this, your BMR will also go down. Furthermore, adaptive thermogenesis can kick in, and this basically means that your body will kind of adapt to the amount of calories that you're intaking needs. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis tends to drop, and that's another reason why you have to drop calories eventually. It's also interesting to note that all of those factors that I just mentioned, they reverse in a bulk. So far I'm only talking about nutrition, and obviously training is a huge part of the body recomposition equation. Like I said, in this series I'm mainly just discussing nutrition. For strength training, it will suffice to say for now that I recommend provide a stimulus for muscle growth as frequent as you need. Novices can have a lower training frequency per week. More advanced individuals benefit from a higher training frequency. Make sure you get progressively stronger in your exercise selection over time. That's going to be a very good marker of progress. I think you by now have a good idea on how to estimate your weekly calorie needs. Monitor what happens to your body weight, to your body composition. Reflect upon that, reassess your situation, make adjustments. What adjustments you should make, what data you should track, how to distribute your weekly calories on a day-to-day basis. I will discuss this in upcoming videos. And that's basically it. I hope this video was informative. Please let me know what you thought in the comment section below. I would appreciate any feedback. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thanks a lot. See you in the next video. Beard mode. Beard game strong. Maybe I should do a backflip. I haven't done a backflip in forever, so that was okay. See you.